In every discipline, there are subjects which are inherently boring. If you go ask anybody, what is the most difficult subject in your discipline to teach? In my particular case, in landscape architecture, the least interesting for many of our students is landscape engineering, and in particular, construction materials. So if anybody can make the subject of asphalt interesting, I would like to meet them. But to get to the point of how do you actually connect, I think you can take relatively uninteresting topics and stop and think about how can you make it at least tolerable or mildly interesting. And so, for instance, you can talk about the history of the material and in historical terms, where was this material used? Where did it come from? What are some of the limitations of it? And put it into some context first, and then have a little bit of fun with it. And I think what you really have to do is sort of boil a lot of things down to find out how does it really fit into the student's way of learning. They really, very often, particularly students who are studying in a major, would like to know something, but they'd like to know why is it important. Mm-hmm. And very often we forget to provide context. So another thing that I'm really big on is context. I spend part of every class at the beginning and actually do it several times during the class, reminding people of where we are in the learning process. This is what we've learned. This is why we've learned it. This is where we are, and this is where we're going. And at the end of the day, at the end of the class, at the end of this unit, the objectives behind what we're doing is this, that, or the other thing. And I think if you keep reinforcing that, you keep trying very hard to acquaint students as to where they are, it will help them. I think what many of us forget is that our students are often reasonably young people, not always. They're taking 4, 5, sometimes 6 courses. We oftentimes forget, because we're teaching 2 courses or 3 courses, that our students have got a whole lot of other things. Very often they're working and that, and we tend to lose. I've had people suggest to me that consideration is not important, and I would maintain that it is important. The students will respond quite favorably if you help them, assist them in their learning by giving them some context of why they're learning what they're learning, why it's important, and what they're going to be able to do with it at the end. If it's a subject where that doesn't directly relate, you can relate it to something in everyday life. I sat in on a course recently with another one of our award-winning faculty members in organic chemistry, and I know nothing about organic chemistry. And they had this long carbon chain up on the board, and eventually he sort of stopped and said, "Well, what do we think this is?" And the students didn't know, and he said, "This is actually dynamite." And he said, "And this is why this has happened, and this is what happens with it." And well, the students all of a sudden, from a subject which was incredibly theoretical, he brought it back to real life. And I think that's what it is, sort of these connections, making these connections, helping the students make connections when they're in their busy lives and when they're grappling with the concepts and the theories, and getting them to relate it to real life, no matter what it is.